but strong. Jesus, keep me from all wrong. I'll be satisfied as long as I walk, dear Lord, close to Thee. Just a closer walk with Thee. Grant it, Jesus, is my plea. Daily walking close to Thee. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be. Through this world of toil and snares, if I falter, Lord, who cares? Who with me my burden shares? None but Thee, dear Lord, none but Thee. Just a closer walk with Thee. Grant it, Jesus, is my plea. Daily walking close to Thee. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be. When my feeble life is o'er, time for me will be no more. Guide me gently, safely o'er to Thy kingdom shore, to Thy shore. Just a closer walk with Thee. Grant it, Jesus, is my plea. Daily walking close to Thee. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be. Sing the wondrous love of Jesus, sing His mercy and His grace. In the mansions bright and blessed, He'll prepare for us a place.
When we
all get to heaven,
what a
day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. While we walk the pilgrim pathway, clouds will overspread the sky. But when traveling days are over, not a shadow, not a sign.
When we
all get to heaven,
what a
day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. Let us then be true and faithful, trusting, serving every day. Just one glimpse of Him in glory will the toils of life repay.
When we
all get to heaven,
what a
day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. Onward to the prize before us, soon His beauty will behold. Soon the pearly gates will open, we shall tread the streets of gold.
when we
all get to heaven.
What a
day of rejoicing that will be when we all see Jesus. We'll sing and shout the victory.
Wonderful story of love,
Tell it to me again.
Wonderful story of love,
With the immortal strain, angels with rapture announce it, shepherds with wonder receive it. Sinner, oh, won't you believe it? Wonderful story of love. Wonderful story of love. Wonderful story of love. Wonderful story of love. Wonderful story of love.
wonderful story of love,
Though you are far away,
wonderful story of love,
still he doth call today, calling from Calvary's mountain, down from the crystal bright fountain.
We talked about from about chapter 8, verse 27, till where we finished last week. Most of that is Jesus revealing his identity, revealing to people his authority and that he is God. It shifts a little bit here, and he starts to talk about not just his authority, but also his coming death. He hasn't done a whole lot of discussion about the death at this point. And we're also going to notice something in just a moment, that he is limiting the discussion about his death to only certain people. It's not general knowledge being preached at this point. That's going to specific people. And so let's just get into it, starting in verse 30. They went on from there, and by the way, the they is Jesus and the disciples, because that's the last group that was talking. They went on from there and passed through Galilee, and he did not want anyone to know. Why would he not want anyone to know? That's he doesn't want the crowds. Okay? So what we're fixing to talk about is something that he has a particular audience in mind for. He doesn't want general crowds around for the things that he wants to do and say. That kind of is counterintuitive to what we do. Let's say we have a gospel meeting. Do we not want people to know? No, we actually print out flyers and distribute them and invite people and try to, we do a poor job of it sometimes, but try to build up awareness so that people of the community will hear about it and will come. And that is what, I'm going to use some of these terms very loosely. That is what many ministers do in their ministries as they travel around the country. So they got these big stadium ministries. They're trying to draw tens of, if not hundreds of thousands of people to come listen. They'll actually send advance teams a month before they go to a town to start doing the groundwork and making people aware and building the anticipation to generate the buzz that's necessary to create these huge crowds. Politicians do the same thing. In fact, when I was preaching in Lindale, Texas, there was a politician that was coming into town. He represented our area. He was coming into town, and he determined that he was going to worship that Sunday with us. And so he actually called during the week before and spoke to I was working with another preacher, spoke to the other preacher and said, hey, actually it wasn't him. It was one of his people. This individual is going to be in town. He intends to come to y'all's worship service Sunday morning. What they were expecting is for us to make a big deal out of it, for us to usher them in and give them a seat of prominence, and possibly even give him the opportunity to address the crowd. That kind of advance work, though, was they didn't just come out and ask, but they talked to us in advance with enough time so that we could make preparations to create, hey, this person's going to be here to try to draw people from the community, get a full building. We give him the stage and he gets a chance to make his campaign pitch in a church. We didn't do any of that. We said, that'd be great. Come on in. By the way, he didn't show up.
That would have been a perfect time to have a lesson about taking the lowest seat.
But I mean, it was very clear what he wanted to accomplish and what his campaign wanted to accomplish by doing this. Jesus is doing the exact opposite. He is wanting for no one to know he's around, so he can control his audience and control who gets this information. He did not want anyone to know, for he was teaching his disciples, saying to them, the Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him. And when he is killed, after 3 days, he will rise. All right, I want to stop there. Don't read ahead. If you studied this week ahead, forget what you studied for a minute. I'm going to ask this question. We just read what Jesus told them, and I'll read it again. The Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him. And when he is killed, after 3 days, he will rise. What did Jesus mean? What was he talking about? All right. He was talking about his crucifixion and the fact that he was going to be raised on the third day, right? It's pretty clear. He's going to be delivered into the hands of men. That is to say, that these men are going to be given authority over him. Able to act, able to do things, able to execute him. And in fact, you'll recall at one time when he's talking to the authorities, he actually said to the authority, you wouldn't have any authority over me except it was given to you. And so that's what he's saying. He's going to be handed over to men. These men are going to kill him. And when he has been killed, 3 days later, he's going to be raised. Seems pretty simple. Seems pretty direct. These are not complicated words. I'm pretty sure that average 6, 7-year-old would understand generally what these words mean. Not complicated at all. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, see, you're cheating. You're thinking about where he goes with this, and I'm not to that yet.
You think anybody made the correlation between 30 days
No,
in Jerusalem?
no, I don't think so. There's a lot of things that I don't think they made correlation to, and in fact, they didn't even completely grasp what he was telling them, because it goes on to tell us. Now, Miss Karen, we can go there now. They did not understand the saying. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, this is pretty clear and direct and very specific words. Why does it say they did not understand?
They didn't want them.
Okay, possibly. First off, we need to understand this. We've got to be fair to them. We have more information than they had. We know a whole lot more about this story, that they were in the middle of it. I think that our brothers brought up a very good point. They didn't want for that to be what happens. And that has a big impact on whether we believe something or whether we understand something. We tend to understand things the way that we want to understand them. Any of you that have had children, I promise you know this, because you give instructions to your children and they do things differently than you instructed them. And they said, but I thought that's what you meant. Do you know why they thought that's what you meant? Because that's what they wanted you to mean. And they interpret your words in the most favorable way to get what they want. By the way, it's not just your kids that do that. You do that too. We all do that. That's one of the dangers about collecting information and drawing conclusions, is we tend to interpret the information in the way that we want it to conclude. That is why you should have people around you that you are discussing things with who say, well, what about this? Does that affect this? Are you sure you're right about that? Here's the problem with your thinking. Yes, sir.
So it may be a matter of like, they're trying to figure out, well, usually doesn't actually mean exactly, so no.
Yeah.
But what could it possibly,
Right.
possibly mean, you know, and since they're afraid to ask it, so maybe they're like,
What?
we should understand this, but we don't, you know.
And that's the next thing that I want to talk about. So they don't understand. There's a lot of potential reasons why they don't understand. But what this tells us, and again, remember, all these things are written down and recorded for our learning. What this tells me is that I need to be very careful about reading and drawing conclusions about this book, because I may not understand it because I don't like the implication. Listen, I'll give you an example of what we're talking about. He even gets more explicit. And the closer he gets to his death, the more explicit he gets about what's going to happen. And then there's this day that he basically tells his disciple, okay, it's time. This is now going to happen. And Peter's response is, no, I'll never let it happen. And what does Jesus say to him? Get behind me, Satan. So here's Peter, one of the three. And when I say one of the three, what am I talking about? Those three disciples that were the closest, those three disciples that got brought into, here, I'm going to let you see the transfiguration. I'm going to give you this information that I'm not getting. One of the three insiders who still is rejecting the plan of God that involves Jesus going to the cross. Why is he rejecting it? Because he loves Jesus and he don't want him to be killed. He doesn't like that end. And so he refuses to believe it. And so we have that problem to deal with. And that is why venues such as this, where we can talk to each other, are so important. That's why we get passages like that passage in Proverbs, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another, so that we understand that we need the insight and the consideration and the thoughts of others to help hone our understanding. Secondarily, having knowledge and having understanding are two different things. That's introduced here as well. Did they know what he said? Yeah, he just said it. They probably could have repeated it verbatim because it really wasn't that complicated. The Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of men. They will kill him, and when he is killed, he will be raised on the third day. Pretty sure I'm pretty close to the exact words that I just read, and I didn't look at it again. It's not that complicated. It's not that they didn't know what he said. They didn't understand. Grasping something and understanding it is different than having knowledge about it. And there are certain things that becomes extremely clear on. You can tell very quickly if someone understands the game of football or if they just know football terms. In a conversation, someone who knows football will be able really quickly to tell if the person they're talking to is just using words that they've heard associated with football or they really understand the game. It literally, in a matter of seconds, they'll know. That's true in the aviation world. That's true in the music world. There's just a gazillion different applications where you can go, okay, this person is aware of music, but they don't understand. Same thing is true with the Bible. There's a lot of people who can quote Bible verses, but they don't understand. And then understanding is even slightly different than wisdom, which is possessing the ability to take from your knowledge and understanding and make real life application of those things, primarily to yourself. So we pick up on that difference. They heard what he said, but they didn't understand the saying. And then the last one that's pointed out, and they were afraid to ask him. Listen, this is another terribly dangerous place to be, but it's extremely common. Why were they afraid to ask him? Did they think that he was going to strike them dead? Was he going to pull the sword off of his side out of his scabbard and chop their head off for asking him a question? No, the king may do that. You'll remember that, well, what was her name? Mordecai was her cousin, Esther. Esther was afraid to go in and ask the king because she was afraid she might be killed. The king might do that, but Jesus, not even carrying a weapon, as far as I know. He's never killed anybody before for asking a question. Somebody had just come up and asked him a question, complete stranger, and he didn't do anything. Why were these people who had been around him for 3 years, or getting close to 3 years now, afraid to ask him a question? The same reason we don't ask questions in Bible class. We're afraid we're going to get embarrassed. Because if I ask a question, what does that mean? I don't understand. So if I ask the question, then everybody knows I don't understand. And I think they're all going to look at me and say, he must be an idiot. And so I just don't ask the question because I'm afraid that it's going to make me look bad. Yes, ma'am. They did not. That's a good question. I mean, that's a good thing. Yes, ma'am. Yep. Exactly. Now, and I'm glad you brought that up. I'm very glad you brought that up because that leads nicely into the next thing I'm going to say. We need to create an environment where people feel comfortable asking questions, where we don't ostracize people or look at them as if there's something less because they don't listen. None of us know any of this stuff unless someone teaches us. There's the great example. The eunuch is reading Isaiah 53 in his chariot. Philip runs up and joins the chariot. He says, "Hey, do you understand what you're reading?" And the eunuch was afraid to ask. No, that's not what it says. What does he do? He does the most humble thing that anyone could. How could I possibly understand it unless somebody explains it to me? And so, starting at that point, the text says Philip explained to him the gospel. We need to, as individuals, be open to understand or to recognize, I guess is a better word, where we lack understanding of something and go, hey, I need to ask a question about this. I want to understand this. I don't want to just know, I want to understand it. And secondly, we need to be open and supportive of people who ask questions. Listen, that's the best thing in the world that can happen, is for someone to ask a genuine question. And so it's a problem that they were afraid to ask. And it wasn't because of Jesus's demeanor or the way he treated people that asked him questions. And so that tells me that their fear was more about themselves and how they would be perceived. Now, there are times, by the way, that he did say things to people like, "You've been with me so long and you still don't understand." And so he did have expectations for them. But we need to be careful not to let people's expectations of us prevent us from growing. You know how I learned how to drive a standard shift automobile? I'll tell you this is a brief story, and it illustrates the point very well. So I'm going to do it. I was a teenager. Every car that my parents ever owned from the time I was 3 was an automatic. I never did drive my mother's old Ford that was a column shift manual train. In fact, she didn't drive it very much. After she started seeing my future stepfather, he started driving that car, and she drove his car, which was an automatic, because basically she could drive it 2 places, and that was it. No one ever taught me how to drive a manual transmission automobile. I was dating a girl in high school who had a manual transmission automobile. And we were leaving somewhere, and I was asked, do you know how to drive a standard shift? And I said, sure. And I learned really quick how to drive a standard shift, backing out of her driveway, because I didn't want to look like a complete idiot. I was afraid to say, no, I've never done that before. No one's ever showed me. We can't be that way. We can't be that way. We have to be receptive and willing to say, look, I don't know about this. So can you help me learn? And that's a healthy situation. And a healthy situation for a local church to be in is to create an environment where we know, hey, wait a minute, these people around me, they have my back. And I need to not be afraid that I'm going to reveal my weaknesses to them and they're going to exploit them. I need to be able to tell them where my weaknesses are so that they can help me. And listen, folks, if the people in this room, you're afraid they're not actually going to help you, one of 2 things is the case. There's something seriously wrong here. Or you fail to appreciate the care and concern that your brethren have for you. This ought to be the safest space in this parish for us. The place where we can come in and say, hey, I'm having trouble with this. I don't understand this. I need help with this. And the people surround us and lift us up and help us and strengthen us and move us forward and make us better. And if we're not doing that, shame on us. And beyond shame on us, there's going to be a day that we stand before God. We're going to have to answer for it. So we need to keep that in mind. Don't ever be afraid to ask a question. And I am a firm believer, generally, in the old adage, the only dumb question is one that is not asked. There are a few exceptions to that, but generally that's true. So we need to keep that in mind. Now, it's not by accident that the text immediately goes to this next point. And so we already know that these people are self-conscious, right? They're afraid, they don't understand what he's talking about, but they're afraid to ask him what he's talking about because they're afraid it's going to make them look bad. What almost always is true, if that's my position, what is my one concern in this life? I want to look better than everybody else. And so I'm afraid to talk about something that I don't understand because I may find out that this guy next to me does understand it, and so he's better than me. No, he's not. He just has understanding that you don't have, but that's another story. Listen to their attitude and how it manifests itself on the other side of this coin. They came to Capernaum when he was in the house. He asked them, what were you discussing on the way? And so they're traveling through Galilee, and they get to the city Capernaum. And when they get there, Jesus turns to these people he knows that they don't understand and they're afraid to ask him. And they've been having a conversation during this whole journey. And so he just turns around and says, what were y'all talking about? They kept silent. Why would they do that? Again, if you ever had kids, you know the answer to that. When kids are doing something that they know they ought not be doing, and you ask them, what are you doing? They don't tell you what they're doing. They get really quiet, really quick, and hope you don't know. They kept silent, for on the way they had argued with one another about who was the greatest. See, this is the same attitude. The attitude that's afraid to ask about things that I don't understand so that I can learn and grow is the same attitude that makes me aspire to be the most important person in the room. Which one of us is better than the other? That's what they're arguing about. I know more than you. No, you don't. I know more than you. Now, these are the same people that were just afraid to ask him about something they didn't understand. But they wanted to put that picture out there that I am the smartest and the most knowledgeable and the most capable and the most able. He sat down and called the 12, and he said to them, if anyone would be first, he must be last of all and servant of all. What he's essentially saying is you're looking at this all wrong. They're worried about image. And he says, no, you don't need to worry about image. You need to worry about substance. If you really want to be first of all, then make yourself a servant. He took a child and put him in the midst of them, and taking him in his arms, he said to them, whoever receives one such child in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives not me, but him who sent me. What he is explaining to them, now keep in mind, this whole context is laying this out. Here are 12 men who've been hanging around, listening to him teach, watching him work miracles, listening to his claims of divinity and all that other stuff for all of this time, who are afraid to ask about what they don't understand and are wanting to claim that they're smarter than any of the others, that they're the most important one of the 12. And he says, look, you see this child right here? And he takes him into his arms and he said, if you receive this child, you receive me. And if you receive me, you receive the one who sent me. You want to receive God? How do you do that? Receive Jesus. How do you do that? The Apostle John was used by the Holy Spirit later in the Gospel of John toward its end, but more importantly in the first epistle that he wrote, and the second epistle he wrote to some extent as well, to argue this extensively. And that is, how can you say that you love God and you don't love your brother who's made in his image? You want to be first in the kingdom. If you want to be first in the kingdom, you need to receive one another, not try to be better than one another. You need to serve one another, not try to distinguish yourself, not try to make a name for yourself. You need to be more concerned about what the other person needs. You need to not worry about whether or not, okay, and I'm gonna assign some names to this. Peter, you need to not worry about whether John laughs at you when he finds out you didn't understand what I said. You need to just understand what I said. When you understand what I say, then you will be in fellowship with me and you'll be in fellowship with God. But if you keep on refusing to understand because you're too embarrassed, you're never going to get there. This is an attitude adjustment is what this is. And this is a pervasive attitude among men and a pervasive attitude to this very day. It is something that affects us. And by the way, if it affects the 12 guys who were with him all the time, it can affect anybody. These guys were hand-chosen by God to be his disciples. They still didn't get it, and they still were too proud to ask a question. And Jesus can't be that way. You got to be, the 3-year-old that asks everything. What's this? How's this work? Why is the sky blue? That stage that your children go through when you finally get to them and go, I just don't know. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. Quit asking. Because they ask about everything. Why do they do that? They want to learn. They want to understand. And they don't understand, and they're not yet too proud to say, hey, I don't understand this. I need your help. We need to make sure we never get to that place that we're too proud to go to God and ask for help, that we're too proud to go to our brethren to ask for help, that we're too proud to admit that we don't know something or understand something or have all the answers. That's another thing that's really pervasive in this world. Someone comes and asks a question. We're afraid to say, well, I don't know the answer to your question. So what do people do a lot of times? They make up an answer. You know what happens when people do that? There's a lot of bad information that gets circulated. We need to be humble enough to go, you know what? I don't really know the answer to that question. Or humble enough to say, well, I've looked into that, and some people suggest this, and some people suggest this, and some people suggest it, and I haven't figured out yet what's right. But I'm working on it. Here's an idea. Let's work together. Why don't we carve out some time Tuesday night and sit down? You study between now and then, I'll study between now and then. We'll come together and see what the Bible says and whether we can together find an answer. But instead of doing that, we just make something up. And then act like we know exactly what we're talking about. And so if you got this genuine person who comes to you with a question and they're asking a genuine question and they have the kind of confidence in you that allows them to come to you and ask that question, and then you just make up an answer and they walk off believing that, what have you done? So we have to work on our humility. And that's what he's teaching here, so that we're not those kind of people, so that we're seekers of information and servants of others rather than believers that we know everything and asking for people to serve us. And by the way, you'll remember it wasn't all that long ago that we read the account of Jesus teaching them a parable about a master coming in, and instead of sitting down and having his servants serve him, the master does what? Picks up a towel and goes around and serves the servants their food first. The interesting thing is Jesus teaches a parable that does that in one place. Another place he teaches a parable where the master is served by the servants. He teaches both sides of that coin. He's focusing on different things in those parables. He's not teaching opposite things. He's focusing on different things. We have to become less focused about ourselves and more focused about God. Less afraid of what I say and do is going to make people think of me, and more concerned with, do I really understand God? Do I really have a relationship with God? Am I really doing what he wants me to do? Who's the greatest? Listen, that question should really never be asked. You know who the greatest is? God. Okay. Debate over it. Nobody in this room is the greatest. So don't worry about it. We also make the mistake of putting way too much stock on that kind of stuff and trying to identify who the smartest person in the room is, and then let them know that we understand they're the smartest person in the room. Because we want to be associated with them, because maybe I'm not the smartest person in the room, but if I'm friends with the smartest person in the room, then maybe people think I'm the second smartest person in the room. It's all wrong. It's not about that. It's about us coming to understand God. and us serving rather than being served. John said to him, I guess I'm out of time. And this is it's not real long. Let's do it real quick. John said to him, Teacher, we saw someone casting out demons in your name, and we tried to stop him because he was not following us. But Jesus said, Do not stop him, for no one who does a mighty work in my name will be able soon afterward to speak evil of me. For the one who is not against us is for us. For truly I say to you, whoever gives you a cup of cold water to drink because you belong to Christ will by no means lose his reward. All right, we're not going to fully flesh that out today, but I want you to think about that over the next week. This is where we're going to start next week. Think about what that means and how that connects to what we've been reading and what's going on in the development of the reasoning of this book. What is he teaching when he tells them about those things? And then says, listen, well, if he's working with us and he's doing these great things in my name, he can't turn around and speak evil of me. If he's not against us, then he's with us. And that goes all the way down to the level of even giving a cup of cold water to someone. And so we'll talk about those things next time. I appreciate your presence and your participation this morning.
Sing the wondrous love of Jesus, sing his mercy and his grace. In the mansions bright and blessed, he'll prepare for us a place.
When we
all get to heaven,
what a day
of rejoicing that will be when we all see Jesus. We'll sing and shout